First of all, thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Antonio.
And congratulations for this beautiful, beautiful book.
Thank you so much.
I would like to start from, how did your friendship with Philip Roth start?
Well, I think it started with a letter. I had met him briefly through our friend Joel Canero, and then I read his novel, I Married a Communist, wrote him a letter about it. I was so moved, particularly by the ending of that book. And a few days after I put my letter in the mail, the phone rang, and it was Philip wanting to talk. And that was how our friendship began. It was mostly telephonic. Then I moved back to New York, and he was in New York most of the time. We began having lunches and dinners together, and it turned into 2 decades worth of friendship.
What was so moving for you in I Married a Communist?
Oh, that ending where all the characters, the good and the bad both, are translated into the constellations and can do no more harm nor good at the end.
Reviewers, critics believe that his greatest moment was in the 90s. American Pastoral, Human Stain, and also this one. Do you agree?
Yes, it's as if he defied all the odds and became, in his 60s, a very great novelist. Most writers don't have such luck in their work. They do their best work earlier. But Philip, starting with The Counter Life and Operation Shylock, I Married a Sabbath Theater.
No, of course.
The Human American Pastoral, The Human Stain, I Married a Communist, and then those marvelous short books, Every Man, Nemesis, and so on. He defied the odds.
Can I ask you, what is the greatest lesson that you learned from Philip?
Well, to work hard, to work harder than you think you can work, put in more hours, to put in the 25th hour.
He surprised everybody, including us, including the friends, when he decided to retire from writing. How did you read that? Why did he do so? What do you think?
I think he did that because he wanted to end on a high note. He also felt that with Nemesis, his last book, it had taken more drafts. I think 6 or 7 drafts it took, as opposed to the usual 3 or 4. And he wanted a rest. I do think, I've come to think that those years of retirement were among the happiest of his life, certainly the most serene.
I totally agree. One more question about him. How do you feel about the controversy, the recent controversy about not only him, but also about his his biographer, Black Bailey? And what do you think he would react to? What would you say?
Well,
your opinion, his opinion.
He would have been chagrined by the whole scandal. And I think, let's see, how can I answer this? I don't presume to know what he would have thought of Blake's book, but Philip dreaded scandal. He was involved in a lot of it in his lifetime, but he certainly never courted it. And he would have regarded this as yet another scandal and would have loathed it, I think.
I agree with you. Maybe 90% loathed it, but also 10% maybe would be amused by it.
Well, I think your answer may be better than mine. Yes.
I don't pretend to have a better answer. But
His mentor, Sol Bello, used to say, the worst thing of all would be to be ignored.
Let me ask you something more personal now. In your previous book, you started your memoir, sharing with us a personal and somehow painful memory. The day you met President Kennedy, a few hours before he was killed, actually. Can you tell something about it? Can you share with us?
I didn't so much meet him as shake his hand as one of a group of people out in front of the Hotel Texas in Fort Worth, the town I grew up in.
Yeah.
Yes, and that was my brush with history, because he was killed later that day. When I was a young writer, I thought that the big game was fiction, and wrote 2 novels and was very preoccupied with fiction. But along about the age of 50 or a little more, I came to think that it might be enough of a task, rather than inventing, just to try to say what happened. And that was how I ended up writing a memoir. I had written a book about Naples that has a lot of memoir in it. So that was a kind of
book.
Thank you. Thank you.
Naples Declared.
Naples Declared. And I had not been interested in autobiography when I was a young writer. All my interest was in fiction and, of course, in poetry. But when I sat down to try to write exactly what had happened, I found that I was in a new phase of my writing career.
Philip, towards the end of his life, told us that he was reading mainly biographies and non-fiction. I remember he recommended me to read a book about Stalin, for example. Why do you think that all of a sudden one of the greatest novelists of our times decided not to read novels and instead to read non-fiction? Do you see something, or maybe do you share the same feeling?
Well, the muse for Philip in his great phase of the 90s was history. It was history he was reading. It was history he was motivated by. As a matter of fact, those 3 novels that form the American trilogy, American Pastoral, I Married a Communist, and The Human Stain, are all about good men undone when the force of history blindsides them, hits them with something utterly unexpected. Sweet Lvov's daughter is someone who becomes a terrorist.
We talk about American Pastoral.
American Pastoral, yes.
Yeah.
Becomes a terrorist to protest the Vietnam War. And Coleman Silk is destroyed by political correctness run amok in The Human Stain. And the hero of I Married a Communist is somebody undone by ideology. So all of these things involve the world of history in a new way for Philip, and I think that was an innovation, and he began reading more history in the service of his art, and then finally, when he was done with his art, it was only history that he was interested in.
Do you feel the same? You're younger than the age of Philip when he decided to do so, but do you feel that there is a moment where it's more important to deal with history and reading memoirs, biographies, and etc.
Yes, I do love nonfiction. Nonfiction is a big place. There are all kinds of books within it, but I have found myself gravitating more to history than to fiction, even though I'm younger than Philip when he made that choice. I do go on reading a lot of fiction. I've recently been reading all of the writings of Willa Cather, about whom I'm writing a biography now. So yes, biography is an interest of mine, not just for reading, but for writing. I wrote a biography of Marcel Proust, and now have written a biography of Willa Cather.
Can you tell me something about the book with Philip? What was the greatest challenge? It's not easy to speak about this extraordinary human being and extraordinary writer, but also complex and somehow complicated. What was for you the most difficult thing to do?
Well, the most difficult thing in his character was a kind of extremism in his feelings about people. When he was your friend, he was your great friend. He could also be a very formidable foe, and where he had ceased to love, he could be brutal, as with former wives. He was somebody who seemed to experience things from the past as if they were still happening. He had no perspective on the various phases of his life. They were all still active in him. And he would speak about his first marriage, not as if it belonged to remote history, but as if it were still happening.
Did he know about you writing this book?
It was his idea. He said to me, our friendship has meant a lot. We've had a good time. Well, why not write about it? But he didn't want the product to appear in his lifetime.
Did he read anything?
No.
Okay. I want to ask you.
I sat down to write this book shortly after Philip's death.
I know. Tell me something about nonfiction and fiction. It seems to me that what happened in American literature in the early 60s, I would say, the so-called new journalism, from Truman Capote, Norman Mailer, Tom Wolfe, Gay Talese, George Plimpton, and a few others, of course.
Yes.
Now is happening more in Europe than in America. I will quote a name, Emmanuel Carrère. In his latest book, it seems to do more new journalism or non-fiction novels, as Truman Capote would say. Why do you think this is happening? It seems that is a great stream, a great river that it seems to be vanished in this country, or at least less powerful than it used to be 50, 60 years ago.
Yes, it's hard to know what of the books being published now, which of them will be the lasting ones. I don't know. Books appear with such reclame, sudden celebrity, and then the rest is silence. So I don't know. I've not read Emmanuel Carrère. That's somebody I want to read and haven't yet read. The lure of what really happened, though, is, I think, strong for all writers, and putting history into the novel. That was Philip's task in the 90s.
There is a moment in a great novel by Victor Hugo, Notre Dame de Paris, where one of the characters tells another character, showing the bas-relief, the sculpture, this will kill that, ceci tuera cela, meaning that the sculpture, the language of sculpture, would kill the language of word. And we can say maybe that the language of books destroyed the oral tradition. I did this premise to say, do you think that now the language of images that goes from cinema to internet is killing literature?
Well, I think literature will always survive, even if it becomes samizdat. As for images, I like them, but I also am aware that the reception of images is passive, whereas reading is active. And I would never want to give up that charmed space of reading where the mind is completely active and a collaborator with the author.
I had the great privilege of having you as a guest in Capri a few years ago. And one question that I didn't pose in Capri, I want to pose today to you, which is, do you feel that the language of literature, or if you want, literature is a superior form regarding cinema, or an equal form, or just a diverse form? I asked this to all the writers, and 90% or 99% of the writers believe that literature is superior. Only one of my guests said, no, cinema is much better. I will tell you later who is the guy, who is the writer.
That cinema is much better. Well, I do think more meanings can be generated by a book than by a film, but I don't see the point in establishing a hierarchy among the arts. I mean, how many books come along that are as good as Citizen Kane?
Yes,
the movie. So
8.5.
How and the yardstick by which you measure this is always pleasure. I get a deeper pleasure from books than from anything else, but it may be that I'm less attuned to movies than other people who get the greatest pleasure from films.
The writer who believes that cinema is superior is Chuck Palahniuk.
Aha.
This is his idea. I'm just the ambassador here. So let me tell you.
Well, but cinema is a new invention by comparison to literature, which is nearly 3,000 years old. So if you take it back to Homer, cinema is an upstart.
Let me ask you one thing. You mentioned before Saul Bellow, who we all know is one of the greatest novelists of the 20th century. And he was definitely Philip's friend and mentor. Do you see the same, river, the same stream, the same between Bellow and Roth, or you see a difference between the two? And if so, what is the difference?
Yes, there's a very important difference between the two. Saul Bellow was the children of immigrants. Philip was not the children of immigrants. He was the grandchild of immigrants. And his parents were completely Americanized, unlike Saul Bellow's parents. And so that is certainly a very big difference. Saul Bellow was a polyglot. He spoke Yiddish at home. Saul Bellow read Hebrew fluently, and Saul Bellow spoke French as well. Philip was monoglot, a completely American product.
One of the things that is always overlooked, that he was a proud American.
Yes, absolutely.
Would you consider, I'll tell you a little anecdote. One journalist once, when Saul Bellow was awarded with the Nobel Prize, asked him, do you think they gave you the prize as a Jewish writer or as an American writer? And he responded, as a writer, period.
Yes.
And would you consider Philip a Jewish American writer? How important is the Jewish root, the Jewish background in his work?
As important as the Protestant background is for John Updike's work or John Cheever's work. And they're they're never referred to as Protestant writers.
Yeah, that's a very good answer. Thank you. How about you? What about your background? How important is for your writing?
Well, I don't want to put myself in the same class with these other people we've been talking about because I'm a different sort of writer. I think of I think of myself as a Jewish American who sometimes writes books, I guess.
But how important is the Jewish in this?
Oh, I guess it's always there, but it's there in the way that Catholicism was important to Graham Greene, for example, or well, a better example would be Flannery O'Connor, because she was Catholic born.
Yeah. I published a book a few years ago called "Do You Believe?" when I interviewed several writers about faith and religion. And it's interesting how you mentioned Flannery O'Connor, how she is revered and loved also by writers who are atheists or against religion.
You know, I'm sorry, go on.
No, please continue. Do you feel that it's just because they admire her great writing? Or because I think it's almost impossible to consider her without considering her Catholicism, much more than Judaism in many writers.
Her strange and violent Catholicism.
Yes, unique, absolutely. You're right.
And yes, it was all her own. And of course, she had the experience of being in a minority group, sometimes oppressed, the Southern Catholics.
True.
Yeah. You know, I think I was a proud non-believer for decades, but one of the things I've discovered is that as you get older, it becomes harder not to believe in some kind of eternity, and so I think those writers who embraced religion might have been on the right track. Simply because, as I say, it does become harder to believe only in finitude.
Do you feel that it's just a matter of fear? I mean, you are approaching, not you, I mean, everybody sooner or later is approaching that. When we get older, somehow we need to believe in something.
Yes. Everybody is one day closer to it.
Yes. Yes, but is just a matter of wisdom or fear, or both?
Oh, maybe wisdom. The most powerful images in the history of art are these images of eternity. A young woman with a baby, or a young man hanging on a cross. These are all images of eternity.
I need to ask you something, since you say that you're a different kind of writer, and I think I know what you mean. But can you tell me something about your how do you write? You mean you wake up every morning, you write 5 hours, 3 hours, 7 hours, whatever? Because I know that, for example, Philip was very disciplined. How do you tell me something about your writing?
I lack his discipline, but he did teach me how to work harder. My own method is to do practical things in the first part of the day and to write between lunch and dinner. That's the prime time for me.
Oh, because I know a lot of writers do the opposite. They write in the morning and then relax in the afternoon. I think Hemingway read something like that he used to write only in the morning. Most
writers are morning people and do their work in the morning, but I'm the opposite of that. And I like to stay up late. That's another thing.
Oh, okay. I understand that. And so in the morning you do other stuff, all practical things or things.
Sure.
Okay. And how many hours you write in the afternoon?
3 or 4.
And you write every day?
No, well, see, I've just now finished a book, so right now I'm not writing. I'm just teaching, which is very time-consuming and very rewarding. Teaching a lecture course up at Columbia.
What are you teaching? What exactly?
The course is called Quests and Questers and involves writers like Nadezhda Mandelstam and Toni Morrison and let's see, Hemingway. Yes, I'm teaching A Farewell to Arms tomorrow.
I have a final question. A few years ago, a member of the Academy of the Noble denounced or declared that American culture was somehow insular. I don't know if you remember that.
Yes, I do remember.
What do you think about it? I totally disagree, but or at least I think it should rephrase and explain better. But what is your opinion about that?
Well, it seems to me he was forgetting when he said that the best work is provincial in that it comes out of some particular cultural experience, but nobody thinks of Albert Camus as provincial because he wrote about North Africa. It was a scandal when he said it, and the lie is given to it by, for example, the award of the Nobel Prize to Alice Munro, who writes almost exclusively about people in small towns on the eastern shore of Lake Huron. Could not be more provincial and insular, to use his word. So I think that a lot of the best literature necessarily comes out of provincialism. The thing is that the author is writing about a little province or parish that he knows everything about, but he also knows the world at large. The provincialism of literature doesn't mean that the writer is provincial. It means that he's chosen his particular province to write about, and that becomes the mirror of human nature.
But it's a fact that in this country, non-English literature has a share in the market of, I don't know, 5% or something. It's very minimal. If you go to a bookshop, at least 90% are English writers, English, American, Canadian, Australian, English language writer. This means something, I mean.
Oh, yes, you're right about that. But that's the provincialism of the book reading public. Not that's a different issue from the provincialism of the creative writer.
I agree. If you have time, I would like to ask you a final question now. How difficult is to write about someone you know and love? I mean, you didn't know Willa Cather or Proust or or Philip was a dear friend.
Yes. Well, yes. It was quite easy because I felt I was discharging a debt of love when I wrote the book. Once he was gone, my only way of communing with him was to write about him. My only way of mourning was to write.
What do you miss the most about him?
Oh, his laughter, the way he would throw back his head and laugh.
His explosive laughter.
His explosive laughter and all the occasions for it are what I miss most.
Okay, Ben, thank you so much for sharing this with us. Congratulations for the book. And I hope to see you soon. Ciao, Ben.
So long, Antonio. Thank you.